Lesson 89, video part 1. All right, so we're going to start things off with some fraction multiplication. I'm going to write two things on the board, two equations. So here's A and here's B. So, you're going to figure out if you end up with more than you start with or less than you start with. Remember, if you multiply by more than 1, you end up with more than what you start with. So I'll say that again. Remember, if you multiply by more than 1, you end up with more than what you start with. Read problem A for me. 3/7 times 1/4. Again, 3/7 times 1/4. What do you multiply 3/7 by? You multiply 3/7 by 1/4. Is 1/4 more than 1 or less than 1? 1/4 is less than 1. So do you end up with more than 3/7 or less than 3/7? You end up with less than 3/7 when you multiply by 1/4 because it's less than 1. So copy 3/7 times 1/4 in part A and work on it. Don't simplify, just multiply. Pause the video now and work on it. So the answer you should have gotten is 328. Remember, I said just multiply, don't simplify. 3 times 1 is 3, 7 times 4 is 28. All right, I'm going to write the sign to show if we end up with more than or less than what we started with. So if we know you get 3/28, so equals 3/28, I'll put it over here. And here's 3/7. So the problem starts with 3/7 and ends with 3/28. Do you multiply 3/7 by a fraction that is more than 1 or less than 1? Remember, we're multiplying it by a fraction that is less than 1. It's only 1/4. So we multiplied it by something that is less than. So we end up with a number that is what? Less than 3/7. So we can draw the less than sign because 3/7 is greater. This fraction is bigger than this one. How do we know? Because we multiplied it by a number that is less than 1. All right, next one. Problem B. Read problem B for me. You should have read 8/3 times 5/4. 8/3 times 5/4. What do you multiply 8/3 by? You're multiplying 8/3 by 5/4. So, do you end up with more than 8/3 or less than 8/3 when you multiply these two numbers together? You end up with more than 8/3. So, copy the problem now on a piece of paper and work it. Pause the video and resume when you're ready to check your answer. What you should have gotten is 40/20. So, our original number is 8/3. Keep that in mind. So, read the equation for the problem B. 8/3 times 5/4 equals 4/20. So, the problem starts with 8/3. You multiply by a fraction that is more than 1. This fraction is more than 1 because it's top heavy. So, you end up with more than what you started with. So, when you multiply 8/3 by a fraction that is more than 1, you're going to end up with something that is more than 8/3. And what did we end up with in this situation? 40/20ths. All right, so which is more, 8/3 or 40? Sorry, this shouldn't be 20ths, this should be 12ths. 40/12ths. Still same thing. So 8/3 times 40/12ths. You end up with a fraction that is more than. So you know that this one is the bigger number because you multiplied it by a number that was bigger than 1. All right, here's another problem. Let's do another. Three halves times 5/7. Read the problem. 3 halves times 5/7. Is 5/7 more than 1 or less than 1? 5/7 is less than 1. It's not a top-heavy fraction. That's why it's less than 1. So do you end up with more than 3 halves or less than 3 halves when you multiply it by 5/7? You end up with less than 3 halves. So copy the problem and work it. Pause the video now and then check your answer when you're ready to resume. Or resume when you're ready to check your answer. All right. (15/14). So I'm going to write the statement to show if we end up with more or less than what we started with. So we're checking our work. So now we're saying 3 halves and 15/14. Now remember, if we're multiplying it by a fraction that is less than 1, we're going to end up with a number that is smaller than what we started with. So is 15/14 more than or less than 3 halves? It's less than. So this is going to be the bigger number. All right, so open your workbook to lesson 89 and find part 1. Pause the video to get there. You're going to work each problem. Below, you'll complete the statement to show if you end up with more or less than what you started with. Read problem A. 5/3 times 4 halves. Problem A says 5/3 times 4 halves. Write the answer to the problem. So let's work on this together. We have 5/3 times 4 halves. What does that equal? Well, 5 times 4 is 20. 3 times 2 is 6. It equals 26. So, what are we multiplying 5/3 by? Is this more than 1 or less than 1? It's a top-heavy fraction, so it's more than 1. So, we know 5/3 is going to be less than what we end up with because it's a number that's greater. If you multiply it by a number that is bigger than 1, right, it's a top-heavy fraction, your answer is going to be more than what you started with. So we know that 26 is bigger than 5/3. All right, so problem B, let's do that one together. 2/7 times 6/9. Problem B, 2/7 times 6/9. So let's work that problem. What does it equal? 12/63. So, did we multiply 2/7 by a number that is more than 1 or less than 1? We multiplied it by a number that is less than 1. 6/9. It's not a top-heavy fraction, and it's not a full fraction. Doesn't equal 1 or more than 1. It's less than 1, because you only have 6 out of the 9. So, we know that if we multiply 2/7 by a number that is less than 1, 2/7 is going to be the bigger number. Just like so. Remember, this is like the alligator. Or a snake. do problem C together. Ten ninths times 1/2. So, let's solve this equation. 10 times 1 is 10. 9 times 2 is 18. Now, which number is bigger? The one that we started with or ended up with? The one that we started with. How do we know that? Because the number we're multiplying by is less than 1. It's not 2 over 2, it's not 3 over 2, it's 1 over 2, it's half. It's not completely full, it's only halfway. So we know that this means that the 10 over 9 is going to be the bigger number. Because if we multiply it by a number that is less than 1, we're going to end up with an answer that is less than what we started with. So 10 ninths is the bigger number. I would like you to do, well, it looks like we did them all together. So for part 1 in lesson 89 in your workbook, you need to fill this out. All right, let's move on to mixed number operations. Here's a problem for you. Subtraction. Getting tricky. This mixed number problem subtracts. Okay, there's our subtraction symbol. Read the problem. The problem should be read as 8 3/10 minus 4 6/10. 8 3/10 minus 4 6/10. Can you work that problem? No. So we need to rewrite 8 3/10. We're trying to make this, because you can't do 3 minus 6. You'll go into the negatives, just like in a normal equation. We need to make this so we can subtract it from the 6. So how do we do that? We're going to take away 1 from here and make that 7. Where am I going to take that 10 over 10 that I just took out of there? I took out 1 10 over 10 because that's the fraction that we're working with, so I need to add it over here. So my numerator, that is 10 over 10, to add it to 3/10. Denominator stays the same, so this is going to turn into 13/10. Can I work the problem now? Yes, because I can do 13 minus 6. And what is 13 minus 6? 10. Sorry, no, 6. 13 minus 6 is 7. My bad. Denominator stays the same. What's 7 minus 4? 3. And there's your answer. So, find part 2 in your workbook. Let's do problem A together. These problems are like the one we just worked. Read problem A. Let me get it on the board first. 6 2/9 minus 1 4/9. So I'll use a different color to show you really what I'm doing. So, first part, can I subtract the fractions? Can I do 2 minus 4? No. 2 is less than 4, so I go in the negative, so I got to make this a bigger number up here. So I'm going to borrow from my 6 and make it a 5. I pulled out 1 from here. As a fraction, that would be 9 over 9, because that's what my fraction is over here. And my denominator has to be 9. So I got to add 9, my numerator 9, to my 2 numerator. And what's 9 plus 2? 11. So this is going to become 11 over 9. Because what I did right here is I took out 9 over 9, my 1, right? And I added it to 2/9 to give me 11/9. So I can work this subtraction piece. So, what's 11 minus 4? 7. Denominator stays the same. What's 5 minus 1? 4. What's my answer? 4 7/9. So, I would like you to do B and C on your own. So, pause the video and do the work. When you're ready, resume the video, and I'll have your answers on the board. So, what you did is 8 2/10 minus 5 9/10. So, you would have crossed this out, different color. 7, added 10 over here to have 12. And your answer would have been 2 3/10. And problem C, you would have had 4 1/5 minus 2 4/5. This is 1 minus 4 can't be done, so that'd be a 3. You'd add 5 over here to make this 6. And your answer would be 1 2/5. Remember to ask, let me know if you're having problems with these. Now, let's switch gears. Okay, written expressions. I'm going to write something on the board. Add 15, 3, and 7. Multiply by 2. This problem tells the quantity we start with and what we multiply by. We add 15, 3, and 7. Write the quantity in parentheses in part A, then show the quantity we multiplied by. So pause the video now and set up this problem. What would it look like? It would look like this. There you go. You want the multiplication in front. Even though it's written second, that goes first. Then in parentheses, you have 15 plus 3 plus 7, because it tells us to add. So, here's another one. Divide 35 by 5. Multiply by 2. So, new problem. Divide 35 by 5, multiply by 2. Pause the video now and set this problem up. What would it look like as an equation? It would look just like that. Last one. So, add 12 and 3 and subtract 10, then multiply by 5. Pause the video now and set this up for me. Here's what you should have. Just like so. Add 12 and 3 and subtract 5. Add 12 and 3, subtract 10. Subtract 10, subtract 10. Then multiply by 5. There's my 5. Whoops. All right, so open your textbook to lesson 89 and find part 1. You're going to write problems like the ones we just worked. Problem A, add 3 halves and 7 halves. Multiply by 9. Write the problem, stop when you've done that much. So, textbook lesson 89, part 1. Add 3 halves and 7 halves. Multiply by 9. Add 3 halves plus 7 halves. Multiply by 9. Here's A. So, figure out the value inside the parentheses. Simplify if you can. Stop when you've done that much. Here's 3 halves. Here's the problem you started with. 3 halves plus 7 halves. What does that equal? 10 halves. And what does 10 halves equal? Well, what's 10 divided by 2? 5. And what's on the outside? Let's not forget about our 9. So what's 9 times 5? 45. There's my answer. So, problem B. Add 80 and 10, subtract 60. Then multiply the quantity by 2. So it says add 80 and 10, subtract 60. Multiply the quantity by 2. So what's 80 plus 10? 90. So now I have 90 minus 60. And what's 90 minus 60? 30. What's on the outside? Let's not forget our 2. What's 2 times 30? 60. So, problem C. Add 15 and 11. Subtract 6, then multiply by 5. Add 15 and 11. Subtract 6. Oops, what am I doing? Subtract 6. Multiply this quantity by 5. So, what's 15 plus 11? 26. Minus 6 is 20. What's 20 times 5? 100. There's my answer. All right. I would like you to do D and E on your own. Pause the video now. Here's what you should have for D. And E. I should see these problems written out on your work when you turn them in. Not just the answer. I need to see your work. All right. So we're going to move into fraction word problems. So please continue on to part 2 of this lesson on the videos, and I'll see you there.